Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Burke with Fistful of Talent, and welcome to No Scrubs, the only show on the interwebs dedicated to teaching you everything there is about talent acquisition and recruiting, all things engagement for that matter. So we're going to get down to it. Our sponsor, of course, you know them, you love them, JobVite. JobVite is partnering with Fistful to bring you this wonderful, wonderful series. Right now, I got to tell you, the guest that we have, his name's Gerry Crispin. He's kind of an iconic figure in the interwebs regarding recruiting and talent acquisition. And you can see his shining face as we speak. So we're going to get down to it. But before we do that, now Gerry, I have a very interesting question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's your hat?
I'm inside. I didn't put it on.
All right. Well,
I do have a new hat, though. Would you like me to get that?
I would.
You would?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Hold on.
Okay. So while he's getting that, folks, Gerry's a little bit of an iconic figure, and you know him by his hat.
First time seen anywhere. This is the hat that I purchased in Phoenix 3 months ago, and it took 3 months to make.
Oh my goodness! Look at that! Wow. Actually, that's one of my favorite ones.
This is my new fall hat, so
I like it, and just
not been seen anywhere.
Well, you got it here, folks. Breaking news. You want some really great stuff? You got it. And just to pay homage to Gerry, I got a hat I'm going to wear too.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, now mine's really not that fancy. You know where I got mine, Gerry? Where mine was made?
No, where?
I got it at Target. So I bet you it was probably made in China.
Target's an extraordinary corporation.
Actually,
they make good stuff.
Target is extraordinary. So again, there's the yin.
Wear the hats then. Do the hats.
Let's do the hats. All right. So candidate experience. Now,
yes.
Before we get into candidate experience, you got to let the people out there in the interwebs know who you are. I mean, many will already know, but Gerry, tell them a little bit about what you do, who you are, what you love.
I'm a student of recruiting. I love this whole thing, and I have been doing it for 40 years. Almost every job I've had since I was a graduate student has been in some way, shape, or form in recruiting. And at this point, I get to do some interesting things that no one else gets to do because, I have some fun. I go to different countries each year, often with delegations of HR and talent acquisition leaders, to study how human resources takes place as well as how talent acquisition takes place. So I went to Cuba last year. This year, with China Gorman and a few others, we're going to go to Vietnam and Singapore.
Oh, wow.
A couple years ago, I went to Argentina by myself, but lived with recruiters and spent 2 weeks going to work with recruiters and watching them recruit. So I've been doing this now for 10, 12 years. And have done this in India and China and Israel and Brazil and a whole variety of places. So, the rest of the stuff is silly. I mean, I worked. I worked at Johnson & Johnson. I worked in recruitment advertising. I worked in colleges as the head of career services. So, I've done a lot of different kinds of things, all related to recruiting, and just fell in love with this as a profession.
All right. Fantastic. So before we get into candidate experience, when you're not recruiting, when you're not talking about recruiting, when you're not thinking about talent acquisition, what's the number one thing you like to do?
Oh, hang out with my family.
All right. So
I have a large extended family of 100 cousins. We just came back from camping for a week together for the 39th year running. Next year is 40th, and next year we'll have about 120 people. This year we had only 65.
Oh, well, come on, y'all. What's wrong? You're not keeping them engaged, man. What's going on? So, well, anyway, there you have gotten a little peek behind the curtain. And guys, every now and then you're going to see me out there on the interwebs. I'm going to take a little swig of a soft drink here. I'm going to call it a soda pop, because that's how they say it in Gerry's neck of the woods. Here we say Coca-Cola, and there they say soda pop. So got my soda pop. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, my friends, we wrote a post sponsored by JobVite introducing this gentleman to the world. Gerry Crispin. And if you've kept up with Fistful of Talent, if you've kept up with JobVite and their blogs, if you've kept up with my personal blog, you probably will have seen a lot of conversations over the last 2 to 3 years talking about candidate experience. So I think at a very high level, very, very high level, Gerry, why don't you tell the folks very briefly, what is candidate experience?
And that's a wonderful question to start with because it's such a shiny object in some ways that everybody has different points of view around it. But from the candidate's perspective, it is the way in which they rate the experience that they've had. It could be positive, it could be negative. But we've got to really take a look at it from that perspective. There's a few myths about candidate experience. It's not technology.
Mm-hmm.
Technology can enhance candidate experience. It also can detract it. So if you use the tools that are given to you well, you can obviously increase it. But it is about practices. It's also not about shiny objects. A lot of people really look at all of the claims out there and hope that that's going to fix things. It's not. And it's not just about data. Data is essential, but for the most part, a lot of the data that we collect in human resources is not very good. And garbage in is equal to garbage out no matter what happens.
Right.
So I would suggest that candidate experience today, with the data that we've collected in the last 5 or 6 years, we can narrow it down to about 5 different practices.
Okay.
And if you impact those practices positively or negatively, it will take up about 80% of how you're going to be rated by your candidates.
Okay. So before we go there, why do we care? What was there a tipping point for you since you're a student of recruiting and you've been involved on many levels of recruiting? First of all, do you think that there was ever a problem with how candidates were being treated, and why should we care now?
Yes. Well, there always was, and there continues to be. But it didn't cost us much or reward us much many years ago. So if you go back 40, 50, 60 years, people basically were willing to line up, be picked or not be picked, and then move on to the next line.
Mm-hmm.
And usually not without a lot of pain, not a lot of concern. They just went to the next line because that's the way it was. Everybody told them so, and you got to live with it. Today, you don't have to live with it that much. You can bitch about it in a variety of different ways. You can tell the entire freaking world about it.
True.
So what we've really learned is that if you've had a bad experience, right now, about 65% of the people who've had a bad experience will tell their friends, and 40% of them will tell the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to tell the world, a few years ago, that would be really hard. But today, it's not so hard. You can do a lot of things with social media. And that's really where we start to see the cost and the reward of what candidate experience can mean to a corporation's bottom line.
Okay.
And the friction of recruiting. So that's why we should care a lot. The world has shifted. And now if you treat people poorly, they are armed with many ways in which they can impact your sales, your future referrals, and whether or not they will ever reapply.
Yes.
I just looked at one piece of data that we were collecting because I'm doing a talk about college. And college was really interesting because in one specific area, which is whether or not you would reapply having had a bad experience, for the 100,000 people that we've collected data on, it's about 30% would never, 24% would never, ever reapply again.
Wow.
But among college kids, so right from the beginning, that early career kind of thing, you treat them badly at that point, and half of them would never ever consider reapplying, let alone referring any of their friends.
Wow. Wow.
So you're gonna be bantied about by those folks forever.
Yes.
And So there's an even stronger connection there.
So talk to me a little bit about, recruiters. I work in a corporation, so
Mm-hmm.
I deal more with in-house recruiting. Certainly, I've worked with some external recruiters as well. Whether it's intentional or not, and I would say
Right.
with a lot of recruiters, it's giving a bad candidate experience usually isn't intentional. That's my 2 cents. But whether it's intentional or not, what are the top 2 or 3 things that the is making the candidate experience really bad?
Yeah, and actually there's 5. So
Sweet.
as I said, there's
See
5.
guys, see guys, we bring it
And
to you here.
and let's get over the intentional, unintentional. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It only matters how the candidate rates you.
Correct.
Their perception of their experience does not take into account your intention except in one specific area. And they're not asking you about it. They're not giving you a chance to say, oh, let me tell you what I meant. I didn't mean to do it that way. You don't have that opportunity, so you have to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So the kinds of things that are impacting candidate experience are first and foremost expectations.
Okay.
The extent to which you establish an expectation about not just the job. That I think a lot of companies are doing better and better all the time. They're putting up everything from Instagrams to videos of folks who are happily doing their job and loving every moment of it. Yeah, something like that. So it's great when you have an engaged workforce and you can share the truth and authenticity of how that workforce sees the things that are easy and hard and difficult and all that. You're doing a fabulous job. But when it comes to the candidate experience within the framework of the job, of the recruiting process itself, you've got to set expectations about that as well. So what kind of an interview are you going to give me? What kind of questions do you have? If I'm filling out this application, how long is it going to take? You'd think that would be pretty simple. How about how long will it take you to get back to me? Will it take forever? Maybe? Never? Or is it going to be within 2 to 4 weeks? Or is it 4 to 8 weeks? Or what have you? If you do not set expectations, the candidates are left with the ones that they have because
Right.
they do have expectations. And usually they're very, very different than what yours are. So expectations is important. Listening. Do you, in fact, listen to the candidates and demonstrate that you've listened to their experience as they go through the different processes? Do you ask them, for example, after they've researched you, whether they got enough information to choose to apply or not before they even apply? Is there something they would have liked to have asked you that would have helped them decide whether to be a great candidate with high quality interest in a given job, or perhaps a bad candidate with no quality for that job because they didn't know that they had to have something or all the things that you required? So are you listening to them? Do you hold your recruiters accountable and your hiring managers accountable for delivering a good candidate experience? Do they even know what that is? So do they know that they need to answer questions truthfully?
Sure.
Do they feel empowered to be able to tell the truth about the problems with this job or the problems with the hiring manager who's never been able to manage somebody long enough for them to want to stay around?
Right.
So why would you hire people for a shitty manager?
Right.
Maybe we shouldn't say shitty.
That's okay.
The point is,
We're good.
The point is, we need to step up as recruiters and be truthful about the fact that this hiring manager you might go work for has more difficulty in managing people than some others might, but I feel that you have the skills to perhaps manage the manager and succeed where very few people have not in the past. That would be a whole different approach to recruiting that we don't see happening now. And the point is, if we don't do that, those candidates, the smartest, brightest, sharpest of those, will get that information without us.
Yes.
and they will know that what we were doing was playing a game. We were gaming them to bring them in because we knew they had the skills, but we also knew that if we gave them certain information, they might not choose to come.
Yes.
And as a result, we're creating an unfair situation, and they will resent it. And if they get hired, they'll leave us. And if they find that information out before that, they will not only not take the job, but they're going to talk about us publicly and how we hide information, how we're not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to step up our game as it relates to that. And that was one of the next pieces, is this perception of fairness.
Okay.
One of the things that any company can do to improve on that fairness is to always ask, as the last question in an application, the last question in a screening interview, the last question in a face-to-face interview, is what haven't I asked you that you would like to tell me now that impacts, your candidacy in terms of the skills, knowledge, and experience that you bring to this party. I've asked you all the questions I can think of that I know to ask that are important for me from the company, but the point is, there may be something that you think you have uniquely that makes you a super competitive candidate for this job. And I want to know what that is.
Absolutely. And you've just given our viewers one really good, easy tip that they can do tomorrow to improve their candidate experience.
Yep.
You got a couple of other gems you can share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. When you close the job, you should not be able to close any job, without informing every single candidate that applied that you've closed the job.
Okay.
That you found the right person. And that way you close, in effect, that last loophole, which is that black hole, where even among the best companies, about 20% of their candidates don't believe that they were informed when the job was filled.
Do you tend to think that that is probably the biggest complaint that you get, or maybe the most frequent complaint you get from candidates, is that they just are in the black hole?
The answer is yes and no. I mean, there's an awful lot of companies that have improved to be able to do this a lot better, but it is a foundational kind of thing. It's just rude. It's rude to ask me to spend time, energy, and effort applying for your job, where 8 weeks later you filled the position and still don't have the courtesy to let me know that the job was filled. That's just rude. And
why are recruiters not doing that?
Is that not only will I rate you badly after 8 weeks, because that was my expectation, because you said it. You said on the thing, we usually fill positions in 8 weeks, right? So if that's true, then 8 weeks later, I am kind of expecting something. And after 10 weeks, I'm going to rate you even worse. And after 30 weeks, I'm going to actually rate you worse. And a year from now, when somebody in the room at the party that I'm at says, oh, I'm thinking of applying to that company, the first thing that you say out of your mouth is, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to them a year ago, and I still haven't heard from them.
Why are they not? Why are recruiters not doing this?
What we're really seeing with this is that is your biggest pain point as an employer, is when you fail to do that, your brand is getting killed.
Yes.
But it's probably not the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do is demonstrate that what your process is an unfair process.
Okay.
That it singles me out because I'm old, too young, to whatever. Anytime you send a message that you aren't fairly considering me along with everybody else, and that somebody else has an in that I do not have, that you have not set expectations about, that's when you get the biggest set of anger.
Well, we're running a little short of time, but I do want to ask you a couple more things, because this is just fascinating to me. So we had a conversation or an email exchange about some of your experience. And one of the things that has, I think, in a lot of ways, as far as the work environment as a whole, has improved is technology. Yep. However, you bring up some interesting points about technology necessarily is not the cure-all for keeping people out of this communication black hole. So can you tell the folks out there a little bit about many years ago? I think you know what story I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Tell us
this.
I
worked for J&J many years ago when, in fact, the dinosaurs roamed the world. And all of those things were kind of happening. And you have to imagine what would happen if you didn't have the internet. Mm-hmm. Well, you had the US Postal Service. And they didn't operate every single day. So every Tuesday, why Tuesday? Because the ads appear on Sunday. Mm-hmm. 80% of all help wanted ads in those days appeared on Sunday. And you could buy the Sunday help wanted ads on Saturday if you were smart as a job seeker. So you could get out before the Postal Service finished on Saturday 30 or 40 envelopes with your resumes in it. Okay. And so imagine at Johnson & Johnson on Tuesday, a postwoman comes in with a bag and dumps a bag into a big bin in the middle of a room. What the hell do you do with that? Well, at J&J, we hired some folks who were challenged, actually, mentally challenged, from a local community who came in every Tuesday. I still know their names, and I still communicate with them by sending them Christmas cards.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
But what they would do is slit open all the envelopes. They would stack them according to the type of job. The recruiters would take the job or take those stacks. They would go through those stacks and identify those they would keep, and then they would bring back the same afternoon the stack of resumes that are no longer useful or have to be filed or whatever has to happen. And based on where they put them, those same great kids that we hired would then send out postcards or fold up handwritten, not handwritten, but hand-signed letters. Okay. So with 30,000 candidates a year, which seems very small compared to what happens now, I was pretty confident that 100% of everyone who applied for a job knew their status and knew within the month when the job closed. Okay. There was no black hole in 1975 at Johnson & Johnson.
Wow. So it comes back down to, if it's important to you, you will find a way.
You know, it is. That is the critical issue. You have to decide, as a professional in talent acquisition, that all of the stakeholders in the process deserve something. The hiring manager, the recruiter, the business leader, they all deserve something. And if you really understand each one of those audiences and their needs, you should be able to build processes and map the journey for yourself that meets the journey that all of these other folks are going through. And we really haven't done that well. I've seen only a few examples of really trying to map the journey of each of the stakeholders and then find that convergence where we build practices around that. But that's the solution that we're moving toward in the future. And, we've been collecting data from this year, we're collecting data from 300 companies and their candidates. And right now, their candidates are completing surveys for the 300 companies. And we're getting into the talent board 10,000 completed surveys a day, every day.
Every day? Did I hear that right?
Every day.
Wow.
Every day this month in July, we're getting 10,000 completed surveys. Thank God they're not coming in through the Postal Service.
I was going to say, that would be entertaining, to say the least.
unbelievable.
Yes.
So obviously technology has helped us to collect data that helps us to prove that the candidate, in fact, can have a major impact on your recruiting process and what it is you need to do to focus on.
All right, my friend. We unfortunately are out of time. I could talk about this for a lot longer. That being said, give the folks your website and places they can go to learn about the Candidate Experience Awards, sign up for white papers, all that jazz.
Okay, it's really easy. Thecandies.org, but Candies is Candes. So THECANDES.org is where you'd go with that. If you happen to be a talent acquisition leader in a very large company and would like to talk to me about some of the other things that I do, like the colloquium, I'm happy to chat about Career Crossroads and anything you have as an interest in that.
All right. So we're going to let Gerry have the final word there on Candidate Experience. Gerry, thank you so much for being our guest. That's all we have today for No Scrubs. Thank you to JobVite for being a wonderful, wonderful sponsor. Of course, from all the folks here at Fistful of Talent, we say, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Trying to holler at me. I don't want no scrub. Scrub is the guy that can't get no love from me. Hanging out the passenger side of his best friend's ride. Trying to